her latest book, although she does have another one forthcoming in 2024, and she may mention that tonight. Her book, The Gravity of Joy, A Story Being Lost and Found. Her research has centered on joy, healing, direction, purpose. And while she has taught in several traditional educational settings and theological schools, including Yale University, Baylor, Cormac, and Fuller Seminary, I'm so grateful that you're teaching across the globe in many different kinds of spaces, different kinds of groups of people who are all seeking joy in a life that matters. And thank you for guiding us along that way in the church and in the world for the sake of the world that God loves. So tonight we look forward to how to live open to joy. Without further ado, let us welcome again Dr. Angela Gorrell. Thank you, yes. Some of you brought something to write on, which is great because there's so much to write. If you need paper or pencils, we have old-fashioned writing utensils back there, or you can feel free to write on your device or your phone. We're eager to learn more tonight.
Thank you. Thank you to the whole community here at First Pres for hosting this conversation and for your generous words and welcome. To all of you who are here in person, I'm really glad to see you either again or for the first time, or if you're joining us online, really glad that you're here with us too. I wanted to open with a practice. I promised you last night that I would give you some really concrete ways to live open to joy, and we're going to start with a guided meditation. And so in this guided meditation, the best way to participate in it is to first get as comfortable as possible. So, if you could maybe roll your shoulders a couple of times, just see if you could get more comfortable in the seat that you're sitting in. And I'm going to sit right down here. And if you want to, if you feel comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes. But if you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes, you can just soften your gaze and find maybe a place in front of you to put your eyes. And I invite you to take a deep breath in. And if you could, try to take it in for 3 counts. And then to blow out through your mouth for 6 counts. And let's do it again together. You're doing it right when you have that audible breath going out. So in for a few counts, and then out for several counts. And again. And I invite you now to take the deepest breath you've taken all week. Now imagine that someone has just come and sat in front of you who has loved you deeply. Someone who has perhaps loved you to life. This person could be living, they could be passed away. Who has loved you? Imagine they've just come and sat in a seat in front of you. Try to think about what their face looks like. What are they wearing? How are they looking at you? imagine him there. Now, I invite you to imagine that they are saying words to you tonight that you really need to hear. What do you need to hear from this person who has loved you? Now you can thank this person. Thank them for their words, for the ways that they've loved you deeply. Now I invite you to imagine giving them a hug or a kiss on the cheek, telling them that you're going to see them later. I invite you to wiggle your fingers and toes, come gently back into the space that we're in. If you need a minute, feel free to take it, go to the restroom if you need to or something like that. You need to get a tissue. Joy is not naive. That's how we ended last night. Since it is connected to truth, beauty, meaning, goodness, others, God, to embrace joy is to never dismiss the way the world actually is. To embrace joy is to accept paradox. The world is brutal and it is beautiful. This is why Alexander Schmemann calls joy a bright sorrow. A bright sorrow. Last night I talked about why joy is possible and even vital in the midst of suffering. I explored some definitions of joy and wondered what it might be like to try and cultivate a community of joy. And that's where we are tonight. What does it look like? What might it look like to cultivate a community that regularly enters into habits and practices that allow us to live open to joy? Our households, our neighborhoods, our small groups, our Bible studies, our Sunday schools, our youth group, our workplace. What does that look like to regularly engage in habits that help us live open to joy? I promised that if you came back, I would give you these gateways, but right before we jump into those, I do need to distinguish joy in 4 ways. There's 4 kinds of joy. And so that we know what I'm talking about tonight. First, joy is a feeling. And I talked a lot about that, joy as a feeling last night. That's elicited from the recognition of the connection we feel to meaning, truth, beauty, goodness, others, God, right? And so joy, or it's this feeling that follows an illumination of the something more. And so joy is that warm pleasure plus meaning feeling that we have, right? So that's one form of joy. Another form of joy is joyfulness. Joy can be a characteristic that some people hold. If you are that person in the room tonight, we are so glad you were born, all right? And that you're the person just walking around Bentonville, Northwest Arkansas, bringing your joyfulness everywhere you go. It ain't me, but I'm really glad it's you, okay? I don't know, but there are some people who are born, I think, or over time given the spiritual gift of the characteristic of joyfulness. There are people who tend to sort of be like glass half full. They're just like, yeah, let's find the good, let's, that sort of thing, all right? And this is why I think that calls to rejoice, which is the third form of joy, an action, calls to rejoice in the Bible are always communal calls. Y'all rejoice. All right, we're in the South. I grew up in Kentucky. We say y'all. I don't know if you say y'all here in Arkansas. Y'all say y'all. Okay. So the calls to rejoice, and I think we miss this because we individualize so much in the United States, right? We miss it and we think you need to rejoice, but it's y'all need to rejoice. And the reason why it's a communal call to rejoice is because sometimes Angela, me, I don't have something to rejoice over. Or I'm not carrying that joyfulness. I'm not experiencing the feeling of joy in my life. I'm having a hard time. I'm going through grief. I'm suffering. I'm stressed. Like something terrible is right. And so, but as a community, we have those people who have the spiritual gift of joyfulness. I'm thinking about it in terms of like the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, right? This is a fruit of the Spirit. And so in many ways, all of us can pray for joy. But we have those people who have that characteristic in them. But then also, sometimes in our lives, we go through different periods, and maybe it is our time, and we do have that ability to rejoice. But we need one another. We need that community that helps us to participate in rejoicing. And there's lots of things like that throughout the biblical text that are really y'all. For I know the plans I have for y'all. All right? And by the way, it's not a good plan. It's a difficult plan. But we stitch it on pillows anyway. You know what I'm talking about in Jeremiah 29:11? All right. It's a plan to live in exile, and it's a difficult plan. That's what I'm saying about it. But it doesn't mean that the verse is not meaningful. It's y'all, and sometimes it's not exactly what we imagined. Right? Okay, so the fourth, so it's first, it is a feeling. Secondly, it is a characteristic. Or a spiritual gift. Third, it is an action. Fourth, it is a virtue. Something that we can work toward. Something that we can posture ourselves for. Something we can live open to. Something we can make the ultimate aim of our endeavors, of our actions, of our habits. That's what I'm inviting us to think about tonight, is both the third, rejoice. What does it look like to cultivate some practices in our lives where we rejoice together? And the fourth, what does it look like to be people, a community that lives open to joy, makes it a virtue that we're trying to cultivate in our lives? Are y'all with me? Okay, you're nodding your head. Y'all,
We've been together multiple times, and you're still not talking to me. Yesterday morning, I told you in church, I said I'd like to talk back. But you nodded. A lot of you nodded, and so thank you for nodding. But you can be, you can talk out loud too if you want to. All right, we've been together a long time. All right, we can't make joy. We can't make joy like we make spaghetti, but we can look for it. We can look for it. The reason why we can't make joy is because ultimately I think that even to try to cultivate joy in our lives is always about us partnering with the Spirit of God. It's something that we can't really do on our own, but we depend on God for. In fact, the word for joy is C-H-A-R-A in the Greek, and the word for grace is C-H-A-R-I-S. It's as if there's a little play on there, right, where joy is a gift. It's a grace. Right? They're connected to one another. And the grace in life is joy, So joy is a gift. We can't make it, but we can look for it, and live open to it. So there are gateways to joy. The first one, you ready to go on this journey with me? The first one is lament. Lament. It doesn't feel like a gateway initially to joy. You're like, what are you talking about, Angela? But we have to start there because anger, fear, and other kinds of difficult emotions like that are obstacles to joy in our life. Doesn't mean they're bad feelings. I don't think they're anything. I don't like to call them bad emotions. I call them difficult emotions. They're important emotions. Anger can be an incredibly important emotion. Fear, even, can be a healthy emotion because it's warning us of something. These are difficult emotions are often signaling something we need to pay attention to in our lives or something that we need to do something about, right? But lament becomes a way of working through difficult feelings constructively. And here's the thing about feelings, you all. Even if we're trying to ward them off, you always feel things. The question is, do you feel them in constructive ways or do you feel in destructive ways? Lament is a way of feeling deeply in constructive ways. And I love to do lament in a communal way, actually. You don't even have to do it even just individually. You can do this practice both as an individual or as a household or as a community, as a church. For example, I've done communal lament with an entire church before, 200 people in the room. And I've done it on a retreat with several hundred people in the room. What we do, there are 3 parts to lament. The first is naming. You name everything that you are upset about. What are you angry about? What are you scared about? What are you worried about? What are you sad about? You're putting everything down. You're naming your feelings. You're naming what you are struggling over. You're naming what you're seeing and you're grieving over. And this can be a regular practice in our lives and very healthy, very good for us, right? The second thing that you're doing is questioning. So you spend a few minutes naming and then a few minutes questioning. And this is where you ask every question that you have about the grief that you just named. Where are you, God? Have you gone on a long vacation and put an out-of-office email? And that's, what did you said you're all powerful. Why is the world like this? Why did you let this happen? Where is this going? What am I supposed to do with this? Universe, this person, whatever questions that you have. You write down all of your questions and your confusions. Or you speak them. And then the third part of lament is imagining. Imagining. And you can go 2 different ways with your imagining. You could imagine if God were to do something about the grief that you've named, if God were to break into the situation, what might God do? And the other kind of imagine you can do, or you can do both, is imagining how God has been in the past. Imagining God's character. This is where we think about God's mercies are new every morning. Your loving kindness, God, it draws me to you. So who do you know God to be? And that is a really helpful way of working through what we are grieving, what we are going through, working through difficult feelings. And it can be a way of releasing difficult feelings that then makes way for joy to come into you. for it to be more obvious, like the meaning, the truth, the beauty, the goodness, the connection that maybe was clouded by the darkness, by the difficulty. Lament can be done in numerous ways. Like I said, I've literally done it with a room full of people. You have everybody spend about 15 minutes, 20 minutes writing down the naming, the questioning, the imagining. And then I've taken a microphone around and had people share one line from naming, one line from questioning, one line from imagining together. You could do it as households. You could take a stroll and do a voice memo to yourself, or just say a prayer to God and work through things. You can journal and do your lament. You could have a notebook dedicated to lament, and at the end of it, you just shred it up, and like throw it away. A helpful, cathartic way of sharing your grief with God, allowing God to be a witness to your grief. And maybe not just even your grief personally, but the world's suffering. The second practice, the second action that we can engage in, gateway to joy, is what I like to call counsel circles. Counsel circles. So Nina Lau-Branson, she is a spiritual director. She's been trained in the counsel method of storytelling, and I interviewed her for the Gravity of Joy. And she, in this interview, she told me about how she got trained in counsel method of storytelling, and she decided, I want to go to this halfway house in my city where I live, and I want to work with people and do counsel method of storytelling with people who are trying to stay sober and stay free from addiction. And so she went to the center's directors and she said, could I do these storytelling circles with people in your community? And they're like, well, they already go to AA, and they have to and she's like, yeah, I know, and that can be really good for a lot of people, but what I want to do is a little bit different. And so it's similar in some ways, but different in others. Like, could I just try it for a couple of months and see how it goes? And they trusted her, and they let her come into this community and lead these story circles, counsel circles. And here's how it goes. It begins with the first thing that she does is she has everyone sit in a circle, and she puts something in the center where they can make a dedication. And so you could put a little bowl in the center and give everyone a coin or a rock, just something that kind of makes a noise. You could have a gong or something in the center when people make a dedication. And she invites everybody to dedicate the time that they're going to spend together to someone or to something. And there's something about that immediately invites us beyond ourselves. We need more practices in our lives that allow us to live beyond the navel gazing, that allow us to live for something other than ourselves. So that's how she starts with a dedication. And then she does story prompts. She'll do one story prompt for every story counsel method of storytelling when she gets together with people. And it's always focused on the good. So instead of remembering the difficult things, how we got to where we are today, that are, remembering why we need to be redeemed, she's focused very specifically on remembering the good. The sort of Genesis 1 versus Genesis 2 version of humanity. And, I feel like maybe because we went to Genesis 2, 3 so quickly, we forget that we're Genesis 1 people. God made you good. God made you good. That's the first good news of the Bible, is God made you good. And in these circles, Nina wants people to know God made you good. So let's think about that. And let's think about the good that has been cultivated in your life. And so she'll give them a story prompt like, tell about a time that you needed help and help arrived. Or simply, tell about a time when someone was good to you. And then, for the final round of conversation that they have, and she always leaves room for people who don't share stories. And she says, we create space now in silence for the stories that have not been shared, but that we know have been lived. And then in the final round, she does a witness round, where people witness to one another. I heard you say this, and it made me think of that. I was challenged by this. I resonated with this. You said this, and it made me remember this in my own life. And that witnessing to one another, it helps us to learn active listening and presence, and it deepens connections with people. She's been now doing this for a number of years because the residents of the house loved it. It brought them, many of them said, I had forgotten. There were stories that had been buried within me that I had long forgotten, that I remembered as I sat in this circle. You helped me to remember who I want to be, who I'm trying to become, and the fact that I was made good, right? That that's who I am at my core. And so she was seeing people come back to life before her very eyes, and so it connected them as friends too. And so they said they were spending, after a number of months of doing this with her, the community became closer to one another. They would host barbecues for their neighborhood. All these after effects were happening too because of these council circles. I think too of something similar to this being Georgia and all that she's done with Conversations That Matter. For people, here at Pres. If you want to learn more about Conversations That Matter, I hope that you will reach out to Georgia, to Katie, right? And this church hosts conversations with people about things that matter. And so what they do is dinners for people between 20 and 50, as I understand it, and sometimes dinner for people over 50, and they meet together and they just have these prompts, these questions, and they go deeper into conversation over a dinner. And it's these sorts of things, these practices of presence, storytelling, listening, connection that elicit joy, that help us to live open to joy. The next one. Y'all still with me? Okay, good. You're hearing these. All right, we got lament, then we got council circles, and now we've got gratitude. Gratitude, probably not surprising to you, and yet, so many of us, we love gratitude in the month of November. We're very good at gratitude for 1 week a year. Many of us, right? Thanksgiving comes around, and many of us are like, okay, let's go around the table and say what we're grateful for. And yet, making it a regular practice in our life can be very difficult. But there's lots of research that shows that if you make gratitude a regular practice in your life, you are literally going to have more joy in your life. You are going to be, because what you're doing is you're consistently looking for the good. And you are living your life as if there are, as if it is a life that is worthy of being thanked for. And so there's all kinds of ways of practicing gratitude, even if you are grieving. And for me, that sometimes it has looked like different things in my life. Sometimes it's looked like journaling, just a few things that I'm grateful for. Sometimes it's meant getting a gratitude book and dedicating, for gratitude. But I've also seen some communal ways of doing and another way that I actually do every day almost in my life now is I do guided meditations. I led you in a guided meditation. I have a little app on my phone called Insight Timer, and there are other apps that you can get as well. Insight Timer is I use it for free. I think there are versions where you can pay for it, but in Insight Timer, you can do guided meditations dedicated to gratitude or morning meditations that just integrate a moment of gratitude. So, for example, ones that I do will often just say, think of something right now that you can thank God for, or you can thank yourself for, or you can be thankful for today, or maybe 3 things that you're grateful for. And even in the midst of really difficult times, we can find something to be grateful. Sometimes it can be as simple as the warm mug of tea or coffee that I'm holding in the morning, the blanket that's on my lap, the fact that when I hit the light switch, that lights come on, the fact that when I turn the tap in a bathroom or in the shower, when water comes out. Thank you. The fact that I do have somebody to call if I need this thing or whatever. I've also seen communities do gratitude really well. My favorite is St. John's Cathedral in LA. I went to see my friend Liz preach. She was the rector there, or one of the assistant, Episcopalians. They have like very fancy titles for everything. So she was a very fancy titled Episcopalian priest type person, okay? And she was preaching, and I went to listen to her, and went to the cathedral there. It's gorgeous. And one of the other priests, he said, "Okay, it's time to come down." And it felt like Christ is right now. It was like, it's time to come down and let us know, what are you thankful for? What are you rejoicing over? And I mean, people were coming down the aisles, and they all stood around right here, okay? And he's here, and he's like, "What are you thankful for? I got a job. We rejoice with you. My son just graduated from high school. We rejoice with you." And just all the way down. "I just retired. We rejoice with you." I just found out this, that. We rejoice with you. We are thankful with you. And it was so contagious. I mean, in the whole place. So whether you were sitting out there or you're sitting, standing right here, you could feel the joy. It was palpable in the place. It was shared. We were rejoicing together over beautiful things that were happening in people's lives. And I'm in remission from cancer. I mean, it was just beautiful, you all. And stuff that sometimes you don't know. This is what this person's been going through, or this is what the win that just happened in their life. This is the prayer that was just answered. So gratitude can be a gateway to joy. Next is getting in the way of beauty. Getting in the way of beauty. Just the other day, a couple weeks ago, I set an alarm on my phone to see the supermoon. Anybody else, the harvest moon? Just a couple weeks ago? Yeah, okay, you did it, yeah. And so I've been integrating this practice into my life. There's a sunrise every day. I'm not usually there for it. And so, because I'm usually asleep. But a supermoon, I can do that a little more easily, okay? So it depends on what your jam is. Like if you're the sunrise person, maybe sometime soon you set your alarm in particular to go catch the sunset or sunrise, or to go catch the sunset, or to catch the supermoon, or whatever it is. There is beauty that we can get in the way of. And even two Saturdays ago with the eclipse. And I don't know what it was like here, but I was in Austin, Texas, and it was pretty good. It was the best in San Antonio, but I was in Austin, Texas, and so I was leading a retreat that day, and we all went outside, and we put glasses on, and we had 4 pairs for 70 of us. It was awesome. So we're all sharing, right? And we're just all in awe of this thing that's happening in the universe. And there's something about, similar to the dedication of the council circle, there's something about natural beauty that gets us outside of ourselves. And we realize all of a sudden, whether it's looking at the water, at crystal bridges, or the trees as they change colors, just something simple. I mean, even the tree out here in the church parking lot is so gorgeous right now. Every once in a while, just stopping and soaking it up and remembering I'm connected to everything. There's a whole universe, and we're connected to it. What an amazing thing. And I know in the midst of suffering, sometimes that can just feel like, oh, that's so hard to do. But it's incredible how when we get outside of our own suffering, by just these simple things of getting in the way of beauty, that we remember, oh yes, everyone and everything belongs. And my story is caught up in this larger story that's being told. Forgiveness is the next gateway to joy. Unforgiveness is similar to anger and fear. It'll really get in the way of allowing you to feel connected to meaning, truth, goodness, others, God. Whether it's unforgiveness for yourself, or unforgiveness towards someone else, or a group that has done you wrong, a family member, a neighbor. Unforgiveness, y'all, it will eat us from the inside out. And so forgiveness, I really think that forgiveness, and really the whole team at Yale, it was so interesting when we were teaching Life Worth Living. Some of you may have not heard. Yesterday I taught a class at Yale called Life Worth Living. And now I get to talk about Life Worth Living in a lot of different contexts. I've taught it in a prison, different than the prison where I was a volunteer chaplain, but a men's prison and stuff like that. And when we were trying to decide, for Life Worth Living, every week we looked at a different religious or philosophical tradition and how they thought about the life worth living. And then the whole point of the journey is like, how do you think about it? Right? And so this was, at Yale, it was a pluralistic context. So we're doing an interfaith dialogue, or it's okay if you have no faith kind of dialogue, conversation. But the team that created it, we were looking at practices for every faith. Like, we were going to highlight one practice for each faith tradition or philosophical tradition. So like utilitarianism, we talked about generosity, Buddhism, compassion. For Christianity, it was forgiveness. We realize it's like the thing that makes Christianity is this practice of forgiveness that is born out of God's unconditional love. Like Luke 15 is this beautiful ode to joy. If there was one text, you have to pick one text about joy in the Bible, I would say, I gotta have chapter 15, I need all of it. Because it's about what's lost being found and people rejoicing over it. But that last, right, because there's a lost sheep, a lost coin, and a lost son. And the father, you know the story, right? Many of you, most of you probably know the story. The son goes away and he takes his inheritance and he loses everything because one, he does stuff that he wishes he didn't do, but then also there's a famine in the land, and also people don't help him. There's 3 reasons that everything goes wrong. We all get hung up on the first one, that he did stuff, he wasted his money. But the other problems were that there was a famine and nobody would help him. Okay, but he's coming back home and he just wants to be a hired hand. He doesn't expect to be a family member. But even while he's a long way off, his father sees him and runs to him. What a picture of joy. He runs to him. He doesn't even have to say anything. And the father is hugging him, embracing him, welcoming him back. That is forgiveness. Forgiveness does not require an apology from anyone for you to give it to them. Forgiveness is different than apologizing. If someone apologizes to you, fantastic. It doesn't require an apology. Forgiveness does not mean you give this person, that group, permission to hurt you again. Forgiveness is different than permission. Forgiveness is also different than justice. Restorative justice takes effort. It takes reparations. It takes doing something to restore the relationship or to repair what has been broken. Forgiveness doesn't need restorative justice. It can exist without it. And forgiveness doesn't need reconciliation. Sometimes, my friend Mike Petro, who works at the Center for Action and Contemplation in Albuquerque, he says forgiveness always requires a change in boundary. You either get closer or farther away after forgiveness. Because sometimes the relationship is too unhealthy and you need to not reconcile with that person, right? So I hope you hear me tonight saying that forgiveness is different than these things. But this practice of forgiveness, what is it? Forgiveness is offering someone to God, or a group or yourself to God, and saying, God, I need you to forgive this person, release this person, relieve me, give relief to me, to this person, because I can't do it without you. I want to participate in your forgiveness, and I want to let this go. And sometimes forgiveness is like 2 steps forward, and sometimes it's 2 steps back, all right? By the way, Mike says that the example of like the relationship changing is for him, Joseph and his brothers in the Old Testament. After everything, and that's a really long story, so I'm not going to get into it, but it's good, all right? But at the end, he forgives them, and then he puts them on the other side of the country. All right? So the relationship, there's a boundary there. All right? And so it's okay for that to happen. But forgiveness is this process that comes in droplets, Miroslav Volf says. Forgiveness comes in droplets. But it's this forgiveness when we release ourselves, other people. It makes way for goodness and connection to come back for us. And it makes way sometimes for restorative justice, for reconciliation. The next one is celebrating the truth. Celebrating the truth. Chuck stole my glory last night because he read my book. And he did a really good job of reading it. And so if you were here last night, he was touching on this, but I want to give you a few more details, and if you weren't here, I'm glad, because Chuck stole my glory, okay? So, I'm just kidding. It was this thing that really stuck out to Chuck in my book, and it's so cool because for me, it is one of my favorite practices, like ways of living open to joy, and this is celebrating the truth-telling. Many of us think that truth-telling is me telling you what I really think in a counterfeit form of love. Like, let me tell you what I really think, but I'm pretending to love you as I do it, but like, this is really what I think about you or about the world or whatever, right? So, but Christine Cole, she passed away last year. She was a Christian ethicist, and she says, no, truth-telling is affirming what is good and true in the world. It's finding what is good and true and celebrating it. And so I was this volunteer on Wednesday nights with women in a maximum security prison. Talked about it a lot last night. These women, one night I decided to put them into small groups, and it was basically a gratitude practice. And I was like, okay, prison takes away many things. What do you have left? What do we got? What do we still got? Let's make a list. And they let me on this special night bring in lip chart paper and markers. Because I've been a very good volunteer for 7 months, and so they now let me bring some flip chart paper and markers with me. Before that, I could only bring a Bible with me. But so I brought some paper in, put them into small groups. We hang them around the room, and they're all sharing with each other, and they're making a list. What do we have? And I realized on every single list is we still have our words. When we went around and we shared, they were like, prison can take away many things, but we still have our words. Like, we can encourage each other. We can talk to each other. We can lift each other up. We can pray for each other. We can tell each other what we see. And I'm like, oh my God, yes. And so we created this practice together of when I would write some words, sort of liturgies, like little sayings. And we would put a chair in the center every once in a while in the prison. We would all sit in a big circle, but we would put the chair in the center, and I would read the words over someone, and then they would stand up and read the words over someone else. And so everybody had their name called, and everybody had the opportunity to have the words read over them, and to have the words, and then to read it over someone else. And we know our words, they either speak life or they speak death. And so this practice is about intentionally looking at our coworkers, our family members, our neighbors, our friends, our congregational friends, our small group, looking at people and saying, let me tell you what I see in you. Let me tell you the truth about who you are. And so we would, in the first one that we created, we said, you are a child of God. You are beautiful. You are strong. You are brave. You are smart. God has a purpose for your life. And then we had a second one that we did. So we did a number of liturgies, but I created a special one for when you're going to go be reintegrated into the community. When you were about to leave prison, we had a special little celebration with words for you. And so somebody would tell me, like, Amy would be like, hey, I'm leaving on Monday. I'm not going to be at Bible study anymore because I'm going to court and I think I'm getting out. And we'd be like, yes. And so they would come and they would sit in the seat. And I would say to them, may Jesus grant you vision to see yourself as a new creation. May he give you strength to take up new habits. May he grant you mercy and surround you with people who believe in you. May he provide all that you need to flourish as a human being. We pray that we will see you again in this life, but not in this room. Isaiah 43:19-20 says, see, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. Yes, yes, tell the truth to each other. What's God doing? What do you see in the people around you? I'll bring it home for churches. I mentioned Ann Street Wimberly was today at lunchtime, actually. She's a religious educator. And she said that when she was 13 years old in the church that she grew up in, everybody got brought down to the front. So they would bring you down to the front when you're 13 years old. They knew it was a practice. The young people growing up knew when after my 13th birthday, this is going to happen to me. And the elders of the church, deacons, different people who would watch this young person over a number of months or years would say to them, "And these are the gifts that we see in you. This is how you..." It breaks me up whenever I think about it. It's so cool. I was a youth pastor for 14 years, so I just love young people, investing in young people's lives. So they would say, "This is what we see in you. This is how we want you to continue to participate in our community. These are the gifts you have. We're so glad that you're here." Oh man, what a thing that we can do. So I'm inviting you tonight to think, how do we do this? How do, in our workplaces, what does it look like for you to cultivate this practice of celebrating the truth over other people? And then we have two more. You still with me? Okay. All right. The next one is spiritual attunement. If I go a little bit over tonight, it's okay. This is my last one. So Georgia can't fire me. All right. I'm already done. All right. So the next one is spiritual attunement. And this is so incredible, you all. Dr. Lisa Miller and I, a few years ago, the chief of chaplains for the U.S. Army called me, one of his team members, called me in the middle of the pandemic, 2020. This is literally the height of the pandemic, August 2020. And they're like, "Would you come to Fort Bragg and talk to chaplains about the life we're living?" And I was like, "Now?" And they're like, in November. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. And so I went on a plane. There was nobody else. It was me and two other people. It was crazy. I went to Fort Bragg. This led to a 3-year tour. It was wild. Went to almost every post in the United States. And I'm a Mennonite. If you don't know what that means, it's fine. But it means that it's weird that I'm working with the U.S. Army, okay? So I'm a Mennonite, I'm an ordained Mennonite pastor. But my whole job was to train chaplains in suicide prevention and addiction mitigation by thinking about how do we help people cultivate a vision of life that's worth living for. And there were only 2 civilians on the team, me and Dr. Lisa Miller. She's a Columbia University professor, and she wrote an incredible book that's called The Awakened Brain. And in this book, she's a clinical psychologist. She would not define herself as a religious person, but a spiritual person. Because through her research, she realized that everyone has a spiritual center in their brain. She could show it through brain mapping. It's 1/3 innate, 2/3 nurtured. And so, for example, one of the studies that they did multiple studies. They're so fascinating if you read her book, The Awakened Brain. But one of them, she asked people to tell about a stressful event in their life. And when they did that, I have to go back to my notes here. When they did this, they talked about the brain's frontal lobe would light up. This is the part that's responsible for motivation and reward. Miller noticed that all of the stories involved working very hard to gain control over a certain situation. Stress activates what she calls the achieving mind, a mode of awareness that focuses on organizing and controlling our lives. In contrast, telling a spiritual experience activated different parts of the participants' brains, the part associated with love, and another where we experience feelings of unity and belonging, as well as part of our brain where we see the world as active and speaking back to us. The awakened, spiritually attuned brain enables us to see the world reaching back to us. And so I'm inviting us to think tonight, how do we live and cultivate spiritual awareness? One of the ways is through synchronicity. And this is the idea of where you're kind of looking for things and you're noticing, you're awake in life, you're living alive, and you notice, oh, this thing that's here, it's over here too. Oh, interesting. This keeps showing up, and you're paying attention to the same thing that keeps showing up in your life, or to the stirring within you that says, oh, I had thought about this before, and now I'm feeling like God's telling me to do this. It's syncing up in my life. The world is speaking to me. The Spirit is guiding me, a Christian might say. We need to cultivate practices of storytelling around synchronicity and spiritual awareness in our Christian communities so that we can be aware of it. It's a habit that we really have to practice and cultivate. Like if we're not attentive to the Spirit of God, and if we don't teach people how to do it, you can just kind of move through life never noticing it. When I was a youth pastor at the last church I was pastoring a Mennonite church, we did God moments in the youth group. And this is how we would teach them about synchronicity. And we would say, has there been a time in recent weeks that God has spoken to you? We did it once a month. Like, God's invited you to do something where you notice this thing here, this thing there. And the first few months we did it, you all, it was painful. It was crickets. It's like this. Okay? Right, yeah. Okay. So it was like no one was giving a God moment because they didn't know what they were doing yet. They had to learn this practice of paying attention to God, listening for the Spirit of God. So I would tell, naturally, youth leaders, you need to be ready with a God story because we're going to do God moments, and probably no one's going to say anything. But then, of course, over the months, they began to learn, and they began to look for God. And suddenly, we had so many God moments, so many God stories that we would do the practice more regularly. So that's a thing where when we feel like we're being led, we feel like we're being guided, when we feel like the universe is speaking back to us, the world is alive, we feel joy. It feels more meaningful. We sense the something more. And then we have the final practice tonight. It's retrospective joy. I promised you 9. We actually already did one. I'll come back to it in a moment. Retrospective joy is backward-looking joy. Last night I talked about forward-looking joy, how we can get together, we can rejoice in the way that things ought to be. There's also backward-looking joy. And backward-looking joy I learned from a 6-year-old. I was present at her father's funeral on a Friday night. And all week long, she had struggled to talk about her father's death. She was very quiet and was making everyone nervous. We're always nervous. People don't want to talk. And so after grief, and so her parents were worried about her. Her mom was worried about her family. So I'm the minister, and I'm trying to love on this child after her father's death. And we're sitting on Saturday morning at her house, and we're playing in the floor. We're putting stickers into a notebook. And all of a sudden, she says, "Can I show you a picture of my dad?" And I'm like, yes, you can. And I'm like, thinking, oh my goodness, you said his name, Dad. Like, you're talking about him. So we go, and she shows me these pictures, and then she says, "Oh, can I show you my favoriteest picture of my dad?" Yes, let's go. It's in my bedroom. So we go into her bedroom, and on the back of her closet door is a long hanging mirror. She has the picture there, and I'm looking at it, and I see that her dad is standing behind her, like this, and she's standing in front of him, like this. And I'm so absorbed in the photo that I don't realize she's gone into the closet, and she comes back out, and she has the coat on that she's wearing in the picture. And she stands in front of me, and she puts out her arms like they were in the picture, and she said, "Will you put out your arms like my dad had them in the picture?" I'm like, "Absolutely." And I do it. And she says, "Angela, we were just like this." And it was as if the moment, like the joy that she felt in that moment on that day was hers again. And maybe it was even more acute, more powerful. There is a gift, especially in the midst of grief, of retrospective, backward-looking joy. Maybe you are experiencing a time of profound difficulty in your life, or someone you love is. Invite them into practices of retrospective, backward-looking joy. Many of us who are healthcare professionals, mental health professionals, spiritual leaders, we're trained in crisis care. But we're not necessarily trained in how to help people to meditate on joyful experiences. I invite you, be someone who invites people over at dinner parties, in small groups, in youth group, where tell your stories of joy, ruminate on them, think about what it felt like to be there, go there again in your minds. The last one is the imaginative practice, imagination, that we did at the beginning. Tonight, I invite you to think about someone who has loved you deeply, perhaps someone who has loved you to life. This is connected to retrospective joy. It's wild how we can go into our imaginations and we can take ourselves to another place, another time. And so I invite you to make this a practice with your children. This guided meditation that we did at the beginning, my friend Patrick Reyes is where I learned it from. He learned it from his grandmother. He's Chicano, and his Chicano grandmother taught him this, and now he teaches it. He does it regularly with his children. And they're quite young. They're both under 8 still, and they do it all the time. These are all 9 things, ways of cultivating a life where we live open to joy. We'd love to hear from you, Melissa, right? Yes, you're here again. Thank you. You're bike running. Do you have any reflections, things that stand out to you, questions? We welcome them. It can be very simple, just this one practice resonated with me, or this one line sticks with me, or yeah, I wonder about, I have a question about, yes. Right down here on the, yes. Okay, yes. She just wants, they want to have the mic so everybody can hear that's online. Because we have people online, yeah.
And I was led there because of that experience. For some reason, the Lord made it a word, opened it up and said, this is where you're supposed to be. And I was still trying to work through having joy. I can give joy to the women and the men, especially one woman who was there for 40 years, who, in a moment of being in isolation for breaking every rule in the book, decided to dedicate herself to the Lord. And it was real. It wasn't prison religion. It was real. That's where I went. The real me. That woman had more freedom than anybody I've ever known, even in prison. Because she was so joyous in the Lord, and she would sing and always find something positive. And I thought, if she can do it, I should be able to do it.
Thank you. Thank you for that testimony. All day long, I resonate. I say in the dedication of my book, I dedicated to my 3 family members who passed away, but then I also dedicated to the women in the prison Bible study, and I say, may the joy you brought me be yours. Because I can't assume that it was the same, but that was, that's the joy. Like, the title of my book is The Gravity of Joy, a story of being lost and found. Like, I'm the one that was lost and got found by these women. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you. Tonight you answered a question I asked you yesterday, and that was the relationship between stress and joy. And it was very helpful for me to see that so much of it is a frame of mind. It's where am I looking? And so if I am looking for joy, I need to be searching for where God wants me. And the things that stress me, I have to let go and let God.
$100 after this. Thank you. Wrapping my book there. Yes. Thank you for your reflections too. Thank you.
Does your book go into more detail about forgiveness?
No, it doesn't. But Miroslav, the person I was basing a lot of my thoughts about forgiveness on, he has an incredible book. His last name is V-O-L-F, Wolf, Miroslav Wolf. He's Croatian. He was my boss and now friend at Yale. He wrote a book called Free of Charge. And it's a really great book about God's forgiveness. And his family went through, his brother was murdered. And it's about his parents and how he learned about forgiveness from them. So, really powerful book, Free of Charge, yeah. I will say that my book touches on one of the women in prison. Chuck, do you remember this part? No, I'm just kidding. It's okay. One of the women, she was having trouble forgiving herself for stuff in her life. And so I do talk a little bit about the need to forgive yourself and, and why, and how it helps her to practice forgiveness in her own life for herself. But the more of the theology behind it is Free of Charge.
Would you mind saying the name of the author of that book again?
Miroslav is Miroslad. Wolf, V as in Victor, O-L-F.
I appreciate everything you said in that. I work with a lot of trauma and complicated grief, and while I use a lot of these things, I think using them all together, and in particular, counsel circles, and providing a little bit of structure for story, is really important. It just excites me. I love working with people. I'm working with people I work with. Everybody's story is different. And I think it's important for us to be able to tell our story and have it listened to just without judgment. And anyway,
Yes.
it's cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm so glad that you're going to integrate that into your work. That sounds awesome. Yes.
Well, I have two things. One thing, we lost a niece when she was 32 to a really, really ugly form of brain cancer. And so we were all in terrible distress. And I put on my wall, he will yet fill your mouths with laughter and your lips with shouts of joy. And I think sometimes in the middle of that kind of grief, you're just hanging on. You're just each day. But we have come a long ways from that. But what I was thinking is I would love for you to do some kind of online talks. Your manner of talking and everything is just so wonderful. And I think it would really be a wonderful market for that type of thing.
Thank you so much. And I want to say I've met with you and your family for, I think senseless death is such a difficult thing to wade through. Because you just want to be this feels so, and we were talking at the beginning about unnecessary stuff, something that felt so unnecessary, right? With your friend, it's just that's what, for me, that's what's so hard, is senseless and unnecessary stuff. I'm just literally, what? And so the fact that you all came together and you loop it together, I would love that you experienced that. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you.
I just recall something that, I think that we instinctively try to bring joy into times of grief. And it's when my grandmother died, I was 18. Her sister, my Aunt Gladys, went around with fudge, gave your grandkids fudge, and it was delicious fudge. And you can't help but smile when you have, obviously cold enough that
I know, I say in the ground of joy that after my sister's son died at 22, we all sat around her kitchen counter until 3 or 4 a.m. for 3 nights straight. And at one point, we only left the house a couple of times, but at one point, me and the other sister were like, the 4 of us, but Jen and I were like, Steph, we're gonna be right back. And we got chips and salsa, because that's from her favorite restaurant in the world in Albuquerque. Her favorite chips and salsa, and just brought them together. And I say in the book, they were like our balm of Gilead. It was like, you know what I mean? Like this little thing that just, but like the meaning wrapped up in this of just sisters together. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Thank you. Yes.
Can you?
Yes.
You do something all the time that I think is
Yeah, I think laughter is good medicine for the soul. It's, thank you. Yeah, and I think joy needs room. Joy needs freedom. Joy requires play, and so, absolutely, yes. Oh, yes, we have someone back there. Yeah.
So I found you in your sister's podcast. Are y'all going to continue with that? Because the last one was like
I know. Yeah, we took out for the summer, and it's not summer anymore. My older sister, Steph, that I was just talking about, his son, so we started a podcast, and we did a couple seasons of it, January through May. It's called The Grief Sisters. And we interviewed a lot of different people from different walks of life. It was really awesome and fun to do in the spring. My new book, we both had things in the last few months that took longer than we thought were going to happen. She has her own projects, a couple of side, and this is just like a love project. We don't get really anything for doing The Grief Sisters. It's just something that we did out of love for people, and so we do hope to do a 3rd season soon-ish. It's just I got to finish my next book, or my editor is going to she's going to be like, you're doing another season of The Grief Sisters, but you can't give the book to me. So anyways, we're hoping, yes. Thank you for that question. Yeah, it's available, on Spotify, Apple, or all the places that you get podcasts. Yeah.
Dr. Gorrell, we're so grateful for you and for all of your time. I think Pastor Keith is going to close us with prayer.
Okay. Can I say one last thing? Is that okay? Jordan, are you just going to shut the lights off and run? Okay. I got to tell you this little thing that gives you a metaphor for what I'm inviting you into tonight. A few months ago, I went out to the backyard to close this gate that's very annoying. Does anybody else have an annoying gate in their backyard that doesn't shut in the wind and all? Anyway. And I go out there to shut this very annoying gate because it slams in the wind, And I go and shut it for the 9th time, and I'm just frustrated and walking back to the house. I'm like, is that a lightning bug? I'm from Appalachia, so we call them lightning bugs. You might call them fireflies, I don't know. But I'm like, maybe not good. And I'm like, so I sit down in my backyard, my back porch, and I'm like, sitting there waiting, and light. Yes, those are fireflies, lightning bugs. And I just watch them, and I soak up the moment, and I remember all the times when I was a little kid with my sisters in the backyard, and we're catching fireflies and letting them go again, and my dad's there, and I go back to this other place in my mind. And enjoy this moment, and soak it up. And I go inside, and because I'm a nerd, I Google, why do lightning bugs light up? And I'm like, what's going on here? Here I am, 39, 40 at the time, right? And I'm like, why do lightning bugs light up? And it turns out that there's a chemical reaction in their bodies that causes them to light up. What I also stumbled upon was that our brains, and it makes sense now in light of Dr. Miller's research, our brains also light up. Humans, our brains light up. But it's difficult to see. It's impossible to see with the naked human eye. And I realized after I went back inside and I'm absorbed in this information that this is what it's like to live open to joy. It's to sit in the dusk of night, right, and to watch for the light. That's my invitation to you tonight, this weekend, to be people who sit in the dusk and wait for the light. And to remember that people around you are glowing, literally, and in fact, you are too. Thank you so much for being with me. It's been a joy.
Thank you. Our hearts are full. Lots to carry with us. Thank you. Shall we pray? Let's pray. Lord, we are so grateful for this space and this time and for your beloved child, Angela, who is using her gifts to encourage your children in the world that you love. Help us to be open to joy. May your Spirit work among us and through us, that we may see the light around us and in one another that you offer to us in your Son, Jesus Christ. And it's in his name that we pray, and we